Truthfully, what happens is, as children grow up, we start to educate them progressively from the waist up. And then we focus on their heads and slightly to one side.
I think in the old days, you were better off. Because nowadays, they're all specialists. Everyone's becoming better and better. And less and less. And eventually someone's going to be superb. Like nothing.
Our education system has mined our minds in the way that we strip mined the earth for a particular commodity. And for the future, it won't serve us. We have to rethink the fundamental principles on which we're educating our children.
We're not here to tell everybody that they're wrong and we're right. We're not saying that we have all the answers, but we'd like to present a different way of looking at it.
Hello listeners, welcome to the China Jeducation Podcast, episode 56. My name is Tull. I'm a maths teacher at Dulwich High School in Zhuhai, China.
Welcome back, Alex.
Cheers.
Which of course wasn't your name that you just introduced yourself.
No, I was we've talked a lot about it.
What about what to call you? I mean,
exactly that.
you'd think it would be easy, wouldn't you?
I will say I do have a lot of names, and
most positive, of course, mostly.
And certainly our friendship makes it a lot of taking the mick out of those names.
Well. Anyway, Alex.
Never mind.
Anyway, Alex or Torin, as you introduced yourself. I like Torin.
I prefer Alex. It's really funny because I was raised as Alex, but Torin is my first name. It's really bizarre how that whole story came about.
Well, it's great to have you back in
Thank
the
you.
studio. To all those listeners out there who might know Alex or Torin or Tull or
Not gonna this again.
Elfridge Pope III, I don't know. He of course did the actually a well received mini-series we did titled How Ignorant Are You? Not meaning how ignorant you are, of course, but how ignorant we all are as human beings in this world. And we were looking at some of the world issues and seeing really how much we think we know about them and how much we really didn't know about them, and really getting down to the facts, weren't we? So that was fun. And of course, listening to that great feedback, we wanted to get you back in. The researchers wanted to give you a China Jeducation interview where we're just going to nail you now onto the posts.
Please don't.
About
I mean, you say nail, there's a few different ways with
speaking. And we're going to talk about your ascent into becoming a teacher. And that's, of course, how we came across you here today in Zhuhai. So let's go with the first question we always tend to ask our teachers in Asia, Alex, Torin, or how about just Al? Al, what brought you to China, Al?
What brought me? Just coincidence.
Complete coincidence, yeah.
So some friends of mine, so when I was teaching back in Bristol, some friends of mine who I trained with, they were looking to go into international teaching, as was I, and by chance we all interviewed for the same company, and they all gave us jobs and the same company gave us jobs in different cities, and I thought, well, actually, this company has got opportunities across Asia, and I want to go travelling, I want to experience international teaching, I want to go see this side of the world. Well, this sounds like a no-brainer. I have to do this.
So the original position then for this company wasn't in China?
No, it was exactly Zhuhai, Harwich.
Oh, it was?
It was, yeah.
Just by complete chance then?
Yeah, so my friends got offered a job in Harwich and Shenzhen. And what caught my attention really towards the company was like all these opportunities that were there, like, you know, they're expanding education in all this sort of like British education is expanding in Asia, you know, in Japan and Indonesia, China, Thailand, Vietnam. Oh, excuse me, the list goes on.
That's the fizziness of the soda you're drinking, isn't it?
It is.
Couldn't be anything else. So, Alex, it's interesting how many people actually say they came to China by coincidence, as if they didn't really ever want to go there in the first place, but then it came and then they were glad they did, yeah?
Oh, absolutely.
So, going back to then, and we'll come to that later about what then fed you into meeting this company that coincidentally then placed you into Zhuhai. Going back in time, where were you actually educated then? Where did this kind of story begin? Let's go right back to when you were at primary school, for example. Where would that have been?
So primary school was Blakeney Primary School in the middle of the Forest of Dean. A very, very, very small and very old primary school where my year group had 7 kids.
Whoa.
Just 7 kids in my year group.
Size of my family.
It was crazy how small it was. I did go to a primary school before that, but I can't really remember it very well. But like in terms of my primary school education, it was Blakeney Primary School, and that was in the middle of Forest of Dean. I was born and raised. I was raised in the Forest of Dean.
Now, for anyone that doesn't know, the Forest of Dean, of course, is very close to where Fred West buried all of his wives under the house, right?
I don't know that story, but that makes it sound even worse than the place it actually is.
Because I remember as a teenager driving up there in my Talbot Horizon, and we made sure, because we were camped in the Forest of Dean, which is very close to the Welsh border, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Being from the southwest, we thought, well, we'll just pay a little trip to Fred West's house, because of course there's this big kind of thing about Fred West. And this is all true. If you look up Fred West, there was the edge of this terraced place was the place that they found all of these dead bodies, one of which was Fred West's wife. So we drove past there and it was kind of like a bit rainy and dark, and then we head to the Forest of Dean. But you've never heard of Fred West. Maybe they kind of psychologically take away the memories.
The only thing I know about, in terms of what makes the Forest of Dean famous, was it was the hunting ground for Henry VIII, and it's become a big and Clearwell Caves. So Clearwell Caves is a part in the Forest of Dean where they do a lot of the filming for Doctor Who and a lot of British TV series, where if you're doing any sort of cave work, they will often go to this place. Other than that, I think it's been mentioned in Harry Potter a couple of times. But that's only over the last 10, maybe 20 years, where it's sort of like got a little bit more interest. Ultimately, the Forest of Dean is just like mountain biking and camping. That's about it. That's the only thing it's really known for. But I lived there growing up, and then I went to school, secondary school in Wales. So I crossed the border into Wales every day. Monmouth Comprehensive School, where I was, because it was a school in Wales, I had to learn Welsh.
Wasn't it lovely for you?
No, I'm not very good with languages, and in fact, the year that I joined the school, when I came to my GCSEs, I was the first year where it became compulsory for students to do Welsh as a GCSE. So I have a GCSE in Welsh as a second language. Completely pointless.
But you had to do it.
But I was told I had to do it, yeah, because I was in school in Wales. It didn't matter that I was an English person or born in England. It was, you are in Wales and you're doing school in Wales. You have to do this GCSE.
So how long were you at that school till then? Yeah, till you were 16.
From 16 all the way through to sixth form.
Okay, to sixth form there as well.
Yeah,
in Wales.
In Wales. So my brother went to this school. In fact, all my siblings went to this school, but my brother found this school because of the sixth form, and the sixth form and the school and the town was really good. The town itself, Monmouth, is like a bit of a posh area, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a posh area, but like certainly the history there is, and the academics, it's fairly quite good. I think the things in the area, so there's like 4 rowing clubs. There's 4 rowing clubs. There's the comprehensive school, and then there's a boys' private school, a girls' private school.
So was yours a co-ed?
Mine was the comprehensive. I didn't come from. We were middle class. We were okay. Definitely not private school material.
Okay, so I'm just showing listeners, Alex. Do you know this face? This is Fred West, and his famous wife Rosemary West. And I have got it a bit wrong, but he was basically an English serial killer. And he committed at least 12 murders between 1967 and 87 in Gloucestershire.
Yeah, that's still the area, though.
Yeah, the majority with his second wife, Rosemary West. Now, all the victims were young women. At least 8 of these murders involved the West's sexual gratification, dear me, and included, oh dear, rape, bondage, torture, mutilation, oh dear. And the victims' dismembered bodies were typically buried in the cellar or garden of the West's Cromwell Street house in Gloucester. That's where it is. We went to Cromwell Street.
Gloucester's very close to where the
Right,
scene
and
is,
then we
that's-
went off and camped in the Forest of Dean. And we put the tent behind my car, and 2 of us slept in the tent and 2 of us stayed in the car. I was the driver, so I stayed in the car. And of course, what we didn't realise, and this is being teenagers, listeners, that I turned the engine on so we could heat ourselves up because it was cold, and the exhaust pipe fumes were going into the tent. And luckily,
Oh, wow.
well, my friend kind of realised and came out and kind of said, "Look, what's going on? I can hardly breathe." So yeah, that was a hell of a little trip. He did fatally asphyxiate himself while detained on remand at the prison. But it seems like Rose was also convicted, his wife, of 10 murders and sentenced to 10 terms life for a whole life order. So they were both in it together. Gosh, you can only imagine how these human beings can go through such a thing. But I don't want to necessarily equate that and link it to where you're from. But just came...
I'm glad you said that, because I was getting really worried that this is what you're now fixating on, and you've even done some research about this person to show me during this interview you've had with me. It's like, this is clearly a great representation of me that you're trying to portray.
Well, and from the dirt and the underwater lotus roots has blossomed a wonderful young chap such as yourself. And if we could go back to being in Wales and talk about our favourite teachers, because were you happy at school? You enjoyed school?
Yeah, school was. I mean, it's fair to say I was bullied at school for sure. I was.
Oh dear, that's not.
I mean, most kids are though. But the thing for me was because my brother went to school before, and my brother, in terms of sort of my dynamic, and I guess this is me opening up a lot in terms of my anxiety of things. But growing up, I was often quite jealous of my older brother. So I was a bit more academic and a bit more determined and motivated compared to my brother, but my brother was a lot more sociable, and he adapted much better in terms of social situations. So when I joined the school as this, I guess you could say, nerdy kid, whatever you want to say, a lot of my brother's friends called me Mini Mez. Mez was my brother's name, so they called me Mini him and all that stuff.
Like mini me, you'll complete me.
Pretty much it was all like, the mini version of my brother. And not just that, because part of my surname is Tull, I got the name Jethro a lot because of the singer Jethro Tull.
You see, I've never so God, Jethro Tull.
So there was a lot of sort of that bullying that came from there.
What does Jethro Tull sing? What
he was? What was the details? He was a singer in the 80s, I think.
Good band.
He was a British singer in the 80s, I think. I don't know the specifics, but where it all came from. But the thing was, like, there was a lot of that bullying.
Yeah.
I just sort of like.
British rock band formed in Blackpool, England, in 1967. Jethro Tull, initially playing blues,
60s and 70s,
rock and jazz fusion. The band soon incorporated elements. I mean, this is a guy who's quite cool by the look of it.
It was cool. I mean, let's be honest. If someone calls you something that you're remotely insecure about, that becomes basically the fixation, regardless of how positive it is.
Yeah.
That then becomes. That just like becomes a big thing, and that was certainly a huge thing, because I was sort of questioning my sexuality and my gender for a long time. And back then it was sort of the era of like, it was almost negative to be gay or anything like that, and there were insecurities around it for sure. But eventually, after I was there, I came out with some good quality friends.
Good.
Really, really positive experiences, to say the least. Went to university in Southampton,
which is a good university.
Yeah, it was certainly a good university.
What did you study?
So I did maths because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I did my A levels. I did maths, further maths, and physics.
Kind of mathematically based.
Because I was good at maths and I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I did maths, did my degree. In terms of the modules I did for my degree, I tried to keep it a bit more flexible and a bit more open. I actually, in fact, did a module called Communicating and Teaching Mathematics, which was meant to be sort of like a pre-TET teach training qualification. That's all. Didn't really help too much. But yeah, I was just trying to keep my options open as best I could. Did a couple of external qualifications. Did Camp America, and then
so that's America.
Where you work at the summer camps in America and
Yeah,
you
okay,
teach
yeah.
like outdoor skills
Yes,
and
of
stuff like
course.
that. After graduating,
In your camp, I guess.
yeah. So the summer camp I worked at was, I guess, sort of like a starting point for me to get into teaching, because it was working with young children.
This is in between your uni degree, like in the summers, yeah?
Yeah, in the summers. And I found like, okay, I'm clearly building these relationships with these kids and all this stuff. In fact, there was one kid who I actually sort of became like really good friends with him and with his family and all this stuff. Naturally, they tell you don't like add these kids on don't add these kids on Facebook and all this stuff, because you're in your early 20s and you don't care.
Yeah.
We did, and we were confident that the relationships we built, and fortunately for me, this one relationship I developed with this student, like he got really on well with me. Basically, he's like my little brother. He's about 5 years younger than me, and one year, this was like my second year I returned to the camp, he introduced his mum to me. And it's like, oh, this is Alex. Like, this is the guy I was telling you about for the last year. And she comes up, it's like, so you're the guy that my son has been talking about all this time. Like, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you. And I got to meet him. I got to meet her, his mum's boyfriend, all this stuff. They were actually looking to help me get a job in New York at the time. It was all quite crazy, just sort of like how the whole dynamic happened. Then didn't really sort of happen because I was like just traveling, and at the time I was just drinking and partying and all that stuff, because I'd finished my degree. Fell into a job in a call centre because I was just trying to find something.
Just back in
the UK at this point.
In Bristol.
No, back in Gloucester, oddly enough.
Okay.
So
near Cromwell Street. 25.
Let's not go back to that part.
What you were calling.
But I was living with my parents still. Okay. And I found a job in a call centre, an IT call centre. They gave me a chance because it was like, you seem like a good kid. You've got opportunities. We think, while you're not very IT fluent, we're convinced that because of your qualifications and your experiences, we think you're going to be a good fit.
Yeah.
Took it, learnt a lot from the job, massively learnt a lot. And then I was just like not happy. And then 2 weeks after my probation finished, I still said that wrong.
Be at the call centre or prison?
At the probation.
Probationary period.
Probation. I still said it wrong. That period.
Well, you don't teach English. It's a good thing, isn't it?
That's a good thing there.
Probationary English, yeah. Probationary period. Come on, Tull.
I handed in my notice because I applied for the PGCE.
Oh, okay.
And I got an offer from Bristol.
There you go. Okay, so that's what brought you.
Did a PGCE at Bristol. Trained at a school in Wales, Chepstow School. And then I trained at Sidcot School, which is a Quaker private school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's only like 10, maybe less than that.
In Bristol?
So yeah, well, down Sidcot, like near Cheddar.
Ah. So they come to
near
school
Weston-super-Mare.
In the kind of
No. So this is the thing. Sidcot as a school was, while it was very Quaker, and we did a lot of we did the religious part in terms of the Quaker ceremony. I can't remember what it was called. It was sort of like assembly, but it was a bit different. Basically, you'd all sit in a room and almost in complete silence for about 20 minutes. But if you felt like you needed to say something, you would just stand up and say it. And it could be something inspirational, it could be something about you were feeling, but there was always like a theme. It's very difficult to explain. So it was like, whatever the theme was, if it was like to do with like your journey or some quote, whatever that meant to you, and you were just, sitting in this room in complete silence, thinking about it and reflecting on it, you would just stand up and say it and share that wisdom with the room, so to speak.
Did you ever...
I did not. I was very shy then.
Sorry, if someone we're diverging here, but if someone did stand up, this is quite cool. I like the sound of this.
It was good, but
if anyone stood up and said something, would there be then a counter? Someone
Nope.
we would just stand up, you say your Pete, and then you sit back down.
and then complete silence again.
Well,
The silence would continue. So the idea was that you would not build off you would never challenge what someone was saying, because the idea of the whole experience was, it was basically like a giant circle time, but with the entire school and in a complete meditative state.
Every week.
Every week, every Friday at basically break time.
Brilliant. No one would giggle or anything?
No one would giggle, because they like, this was an old school. There's quite an old school, but there wasn't many kids at that school. Probably maybe the same or double, definitely no more than double the number of kids at Harrow, total. But obviously this is being a secondary school.
So we're talking like 500 or something.
Something like that, yeah. And they had a primary school there as well. It was a very interesting school. And again, it was being private and all this stuff. It certainly showed me a lot in terms of... So from a religious perspective, I found it really interesting from a branch of Christianity. But just as a private school in general, there was a lot of education around that. Mm-hmm. After that, I then fell into my first teaching job at Downing School in Bristol.
Right,
so
Downing School in Bristol, right, yeah.
So it's a bit more north, basically just between the M48 and the M4.
Very specific, yeah. And how did that, because you were there for...
So technically, in terms of the educational bit, it fell into the South Gloucestershire section. Here's a fun fact. Do you remember they did the Educating series on Channel 4?
Yes.
So my educational trust got featured.
They're good, those little documentaries, actually.
They are good. So they did one on... my educational trust was CSET.
Mm-hmm.
CSET. My school was not featured because our school was the best out of the four of them.
Right.
But they filmed at our school, but they never used the footage. But our school might have been better than the other ones, but we had a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
So for the area, my school was a difficult school. So when I first joined the school, year 7 was like oversubscribed. Like the year that I joined was like they were oversubscribed, and I think the year before they were oversubscribed as well. And you had so many really good kids at that school. But then if you were looking at the year 11s at the same time, these are kids who were like on all sorts of drugs. In fact, my first year of teaching, I had my year 10 class. There was a student I was teaching, a year 10 girl, whose parents were drug addicts. Mm-hmm. So she was in a really difficult situation. So I think her story was her parents were doing heroin. I think her mum was doing heroin while she was pregnant. Mm. So she was a very difficult child. There was some progress I made with her, but there was also a lot of other difficulties in that class as well. A lot of it coming from me being a brand new teacher and teaching a whole teenage girl group. This was very weird at the time. They thought, let's see how this goes. Let's split the year group for that year into boys and girls. Really weird. For a middle ability year 10 group on their GCSE journey, they split them into boys and girls. And I got given the girls group as a young teacher. As a young male teacher, it was a very interesting dynamic, because the very first interaction I had with this class, they were lining up outside my classroom. I was inside my classroom getting things ready, and I could hear from the corridor, I could hear there's the chatter in the corridor as they're lining up. I could hear them go, "Oh, we got a new teacher. Oh, is he fit?"
Oh, God.
I could hear that, and I just thought, this describes what the year was going to be.
Are you looking to further your career in education? Teach Now offers a convenient online teacher preparation and master's degree program completed anywhere in the world.
Reach now for Teach Now, Ain't no time for defeat now. Teachers, get off your seats now. Future generations need you now.
Work with people all over the world in a collaborative, activity-based teaching environment.
To learn more, visit teach-now.edu.
Expertise that is really outside of the box.
I wasn't in any danger point at that point. Luckily, I sort of played in terms of my femininity and that whole relationship in terms of like makeup and all that stuff. Like I was able to relate to those kids in a different way. And it sort of took them by surprise, and it actually was working for a while. It was really positive and for a long time. And then with this like girl with these drug issues from her family, like that was sort of helping her a little bit, because there's this different teacher. You're used to this teacher who is very discipline focused, and there was this teacher who had this personality and this charisma. It's like, hey, that whole different side of it. It helped, but it wasn't sustainable, because they, you know, the barrier in terms of where that boundary was, the boundary was almost lost.
So were you? That must have been a very challenging first proper year in teaching in that part of England. But could you have stayed on there, or and then this came along, this opportunity of this company that placed you here?
No, I was tempted to stay there.
Yeah.
So when I stayed there I was there for 3 years, and in my 3rd year, I was really upset to leave. But I knew if I didn't leave, I would never leave, because most of the teachers at that school either were students at that school, or they had been teaching for a very long time. Like they did their PGC placement there, and they basically stayed there until they were heads of department or senior leadership. It was a really weird dynamic, but it was such a positive school.
So that girl, did she graduate? The one?
I don't know. I think she ended up getting removed from the school before she finished.
Yeah, big challenges she had to face. Alex, Torrin, Tull and Al. Going back, earlier you mentioned, there were some challenges for you in school. Let alone, you mentioned bullying and things like that. But you said you did make some good friends in that school. Were there any good teachers that you can remember that you kind of, could use for a support for those challenging times, or just, inspired you in maths or whatever? Favourite teacher, and what school would that have been in?
So it would have been, that certainly would have been the case at Monmouth. So when I was doing my A-levels, there were 2 teachers that stood out to me. There were probably more certainly the maths department. I was very close with the maths department because I did a lot of maths subjects, and the way the maths A-levels are done, I had interactions with all of the teachers there. So I was very close with the maths department in general. Outside of the maths department, there were 2 teachers that stood out to me. One was my rowing coach. Now, he taught me IT for a while. He also knew my brother. He was my rowing coach. He was a really, really supportive teacher. Mr. Cowton.
Okay.
Dan Cowton, I think his name was.
Shout out for Mr. Cowton there.
He was
listening. Sure he will be.
He was a really good teacher. I remember, like, in terms of when I was rowing, when I was struggling with like various things, I remember one year I was doing like time trials and putting an application in to represent Wales in rowing. And the time that this happened, I was sort of like very difficult-ish situation with my family. And I thought, I've never been that good, I'm not going to get this. And then we did like a time trial, and I came out first. And I remember him really supportive in terms of like, I went to him the next day and said, look, this has happened to me at home. I don't know if I can do this, and I don't know if I can do this like application. I don't know if if I'm good enough. And he was like, you've done this. Fuel like this anger, this emotion that you're using. Don't let your anger control you. Don't let your emotion control you, but use it as fuel. Use it as passion. because you're passionate about the sport, you're passionate about these things, you're also passionate about this situation that you've gone through. Use it as passion instead of anger. And that was really important. That was probably like a really important life lesson for me, in terms of no matter what situation you're dealing with in life, don't let your emotion take hold of you. Use it as passion and fuel, because sometimes if you let your emotion take hold of it, you're not the best person to deal with that situation, because you're going to be very biased. But if you use it as fuel to make sure that the situation is handled in the correct way, maybe pass it on to someone else, or make sure you're challenging it if you're not happy with the result. That was what it taught me, which I thought was really useful. Yeah.
And of course you still row today, don't you?
I do, yeah. There was one other teacher who really stood out to me. I wasn't going to get a good grade in English if this wasn't for this person. Being always good at maths, I hated reading. I hated English and all this stuff. And then when I was doing my GCSEs, I think this teacher was in his first year of teaching as well. This young, camp, and I mean camp, Welsh guy, short, spiky, jet black hair, and I can't do a Welsh accent, but he was camp, and he was absolutely a dream. In terms of like my teaching style, I very much mirror what he does. Not in terms of being camp, but in terms of building a relationship with every type of student in the room. Because I very much remember the kids that bullied me at school in my class. Whenever he was talking, those bullies would always like, guys, quiet, like, so he's talking, because they were engaged in his lesson. So those pricks, so to speak, those bullies who didn't necessarily care about education, they really were into his lessons. So they wanted to make sure everyone else was quiet so they could enjoy it. And that to me really stood out in terms of, here's this authentic, different teacher who has almost broken this dynamic in terms of what to expect as a teacher. And they've got these kids from both the uninterested and like the whole spectrum engaged.
And what was his name?
I wish I could remember. I cannot remember for the life of me, which is really upsetting.
Oh, there you go. Well, a shout out to him, whoever he is.
I don't know. I really wish I remembered what his name was, but he was an absolute. Oddly enough, I looked very similar to him when my first year of teaching, because I had short, spiky hair and a facial and same sort of beard as I do now. If it was jet black, I would have looked exactly the same as him.
Thank you for that. I mean, Alex, clearly then your disposition was in maths, the subject of mathematics, and I think you started to realise that as you went through Monmouth and you went on to do your PGCE. And then, of course, you did the 3 years, right, in the
Southampton.
Yeah, and then you...
Oh, sorry, down in school, sorry.
Yes, absolutely. And then you decided, look, if you don't leave now, you're never going to leave. And so you get this potential opportunity in Jeducation out of coincidence, as you say. I mean, did you look it up at all, or did you just go, I'll take it?
In terms of China or Jeducation?
Jeducation.
So Jeducation, I researched it, but my thought was, I mean, I'm leaving the UK to go to somewhere new. I have to take this. I'll do some research on the area, but like this is ultimately this is a whole brand new experience. The unknown is exciting enough. All I knew was that Macau was nearby and Hong Kong was nearby. Other than that, it'd be easy enough for me to travel anywhere on this side of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it could be miles away, couldn't it, now at the moment, Hong Kong and Macau, because of all of the sad situations with the pandemic. But anyway, moving on. And you did the, gutsy, you made the move and you came out here, and this is why you're here with us today, and that's very pleasing. Let's talk about your style then. I think you might have given it away a little bit by talking about the man with no name, but
yeah,
what is your teaching style in maths? I mean, when you go in, are you a gesticulator?
So I guess my style in terms of maths is, where do things come from? Because I'm a firm believer in terms of this. Some people say this is like sort of a gimmick, maths mastery is sort of this big trend that's going around in terms of maths at the moment. And it's certainly been going around for a good number of years. I'm a firm believer of it, and ultimately it's showing where does the maths come from? Where do these elements come from? Can we link these onto bits that we already know? Where does this brilliant stuff come from? Why does this exist? And that's what I try to do. So my lesson would often start with, okay, here's some examples of some sort, or maybe here's some questions. Maybe we refer back to those questions, maybe we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that would then we'd sort of like build in terms of, well, we know this. What happens if we do this? You know, those classic questions that these famous mathematicians first pondered thousands of years ago. I would almost pose that to then try and get them thinking about, well, yeah, what does happen if we do this? And then they can understand the progression in terms of what they already know into something they didn't know before. And it's just sort of a natural progression from that side of things. And then, you know, we discuss it. A lot of it, you know, what would you do? I'm not going to help you. Imagine this is, you know, an exam style question. Imagine this is a problem solving style. What would you do? And, you know, sort of a bit of guidance. Well, let's try this. Maybe we do that and see what happens. You know, they would then inevitably do some work. Maybe we come back to the board. Maybe we do something a bit different. Maybe an investigation. Lots of things happen. But then ultimately it's this style of very much guided by the students in that sense, in terms of, well, I say guided by the students. I would steer their guiding. I would steer it, but they would go down the journey themselves. But that almost sounds like a perfect, ideal situation. How do I get the kids interested? I'm just me.
So does that go back to you talk about relationship?
Exactly that, because I'm certainly a firm believer of this, and I've realised this more and more every year. Children don't expect your teachers to be a person. As you grow up through the world, you realise that your world is just you and maybe your parents, maybe your friends. Like, your world is very, very small. But then as it starts to expand, as you get older, it goes from there. And then you start to realise, wow, my teachers are actually people as well.
Yeah.
They're people with like dreams and lives and interests and all this stuff. They have like dislikes, they have emotions, they're people. So when I share, like, I will often... So for me, is this gender-neutral teacher who presents themselves in any which way. Maybe I've got some nail polish on, maybe, you know, especially with my long hair and a well-trimmed beard, like all this stuff. Not today, but, you know, all this stuff, like... And then some of my students have seen me outside walking around Zhuhai in a dress. Mm-hmm. And naturally, they've got questions in terms of they want to know more about me. So naturally, they're then engaged more in my lessons because they think engaging with my lessons, engaging with this is going to, you know, they're going to learn more about me. And that does happen at times.
Because your students are what age group normally? It's like high school GCSEs, isn't it?
High school, so that's from the age of 15 to 18, near enough.
Okay.
There's a couple of exceptions, but like that's basically it.
And mostly they're local Chinese, Hong Kongese?
Mostly Chinese. Because the situation in China is that you do the compulsory education up until a certain point to do the Zhongkao, and then after the Zhongkao you can do international qualifications.
I mean, you've segued a few things on there that maybe the listeners have heard that maybe they go, oh, hang on, is that what I really heard? What's unique about your classroom? I think you might have put that, I mean, you said the words gender neutral, right?
Yes.
Now, let's just quickly tell me about that, because gender neutral is nail varnish, right? And dress, or is that what gender neutral?
I guess it's a bit more... So I present myself as not male.
Right.
But that also means I don't present myself as not female.
Okay.
So in the school, when I first introduce my class, I will say, my name is Tull. Now, and I would then explain, so I don't like the idea of Mr. or Sir, all this stuff.
Okay.
I prefer to go gender neutral. So Mux or teacher, I prefer to be a bit more neutral on this idea. And
I mean, that is very unique, I think. I
believe it or not, I didn't hear it, and I did not hear the title Mux until a month before I left China, before I left to come to China.
Okay.
I certainly in terms of my gender and my sexuality, like I've not heard about that the entire time, but I'd only just heard about this gender neutral title. So I think in your school, it's like if you want to use a gender neutral title, it's like teacher.
Right.
It's the same sort of thing, but Mux is sort of a more official title instead of Mr. or Mrs.
I mean, how does that... fascinating. I mean, this is something I'm very new to. In fact, you've just brought that to me for the first ever time. So much so that I wink over to the researchers there beyond the closet, and I say, and I will say to them, I think we should do an educational pod on this kind of understanding of genderism, because I think it's a big subject, isn't it?
Happily.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to do that.
Well, I didn't say it was going to involve you, but
Oh, all right.
if you're putting yourself forward, then we'll see how the ratings go.
It's all right. I'll pack up my stuff. That's a subtle sign of like, look, we don't care if you get deported at this point.
No, absolutely. But okay. Well, there's some things there we can unpack, and I think that's definitely for another time. But what I wanted to say was then, on top of that, how's that been received? This, uniqueness about yourself, your classroom, aside from the maths, Alex.
That's a really good question. I was nervous at first when I first did it, and this, oddly enough, the school that I'm at right now is the first school where I've the second day of me starting at the school during the induction period, I emailed my head teacher.
Yeah.
This is who I am. I would like to use these pronouns, this title. Is this okay? Can we have a conversation around this? We had a conversation. We agreed that I would send out this big email to all the teachers or all the staff at the school.
Right.
Sort of like giving them some information, come talk to me if there's any questions, all this stuff, And it was very well received. All the teachers were really supportive, and they are supportive. And the students, these Chinese students, have been incredible. Mm-hmm. Really blew my mind.
Did you go into? Did you go into deep conversation? I guess you can at that age, but you focus on the maths.
We focus on the maths, but sometimes it just inevitably comes up. So, especially when they're doing revision, and you don't have to teach; you're just there for supervision. I've had these conversations many times, and it just naturally comes up. And I think the thing that struck me, especially in terms of teaching, especially as a teenager, you are insecure. You're trying to look for what inspires you in life. Mm-hmm. You're trying to look for where do you see yourself. Often us as children, I think we see ourselves in our mum or in our dad, and that's what we then will aspire to.
Yeah.
So for me as this gender neutral teacher, I guess there's something different. Someone who has experienced these insecurities, this journey.
Indeed, yeah.
They see me as, I guess, something to aspire to. Doesn't matter that I am male or female. It doesn't matter about that. It's the fact that I'm, I guess, you're something different, someone who's a lot more open or a lot more progressive, whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. It's something to aspire to in terms of, regardless of how you feel. And that for me as a teacher is huge. I think I see myself as a role model for the students who are almost easily considered as outcasts. Those kids who have those insecurities, the kids that I used to be in terms of insecurities. That is the teacher I'm there for. I'm there for those kids.
That's powerful. I mean, open and honest and you could say fearless. I mean, with the first day going in on that. Challenges then, because I mean there's a whole challenge in that.
Yeah.
Right, he's getting a whole list. My gosh, so I think we're going to have to only do a few of these challenges, Alex. But being in China, of course, very different to, where you came from in England.
So.
Yeah, give us a few challenges.
So the challenge, I guess, in China is trying to actually get them aware in terms of their mental health. Because, certainly for my school, because there's these, I've realised this, especially not just in my school at the moment, but even my previous school in China. There's this big pressure in terms of getting these big brands, and it's all about bragging. Chinese families almost feel like they want to brag in terms of where they've gone to school or what education they've got, where they're going to school, what job they've got, what degree they have, and all this stuff. And it's just, and you especially realise it in Parents' Evening when you explain to all the kids and you explain to the parents and what needs to be done moving forward, this constructive conversation. And then they say, where does my kid rank in your class? Where does my kid rank in the year? And it's like, well, I don't think of it this way. I want your kid to be the best that they can be. It's up to your kid how well they want to do. And that's probably the biggest challenge that I've realised. And you can see, even and especially with that, like any other challenges, as I said, regarding to mental health, ultimately stems from this. This is like sort of like the big challenge I'm realising. It's getting there for sure. I think I've been very fortunate that I'm able to make a lot of progression because I'm very relatable. I'm very easy. It's very easy for for kids to engage with my lessons because of that relatability. I think there's some things I do well, but there are other things I don't do well for sure. I think that's just the case with every teacher. And in terms of trying to get kids like to relax, in terms of chilling and relaxing and enjoying them, like trying to actually take care of their mental health, I think I do very well from that perspective, from a pastoral perspective. But in terms of going into the depth of like the maths, maybe not so much. But that's just because in this environment, I think pastoral care is much more important. Because let's be honest, I think that's a much more challenging thing. If a kid is getting all this pressure from their parents in terms of getting getting every possible top grade and all this stuff, the motivation's already there. As long as you teach them to an okay standard, but then you're focusing on the pastoral care, I think that's sort of a more priority for me.
And I know that your school, only in the last few years, has brought on their first, I think, full-time counsellor or guidance officer of some kind to very much focus on the well-being of that particular group. Mine's, IGCSEs, because it is a very high stakes, pressured environment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they are only young children. And
I mean, we, as you and I know, especially from our experiences growing up, this expectation with GCSEs and A-levels, in fact, education across China, you're expected to know what subject you're meant to be, or what area you're going to be studying in, or what area your career is going to be in.
Yes. By
the age of 16.
Yeah, wow.
You're meant to know that career choice by that young.
Well, and I don't think school from the very day we start has really focused on that at all. And then
absolutely
they feel
not.
We need to be focusing on it when they're giving us no tools to get us anywhere near it. So,
yeah. I mean, all this passionate stuff I've talked about education as well today, like, I am also a firm believer that education is completely broken worldwide.
Well, I would have to agree with you, and we do agree on many points, but I am going to shut you down now.
Yeah, I talk too much, don't I?
Because I have the power to do that, and I'm being told that it is time. But leave us. There's just some wonderful things you brought up, and I think Alex, you would be a great person to have on to talk about, genderism and the great diversity that we're seeing now in the 21st century world of information. So let's talk about that another time. But for now, Alex, Al, Tull, or Torin, leave us with your teacher's tip.
I guess I would say just, be yourself. A lot of teachers say, try and they say, don't show your emotions. Try to sort of control how much of a person you are. Every teacher has their own style, but kids are curious about you as a person because you are a role model of some sort. There's no harm in showing emotion. There's no harm in showing your interests. You decide on the boundaries that you want to set, but show that you're a person. Show that you're a person with hopes and dreams, and that you are a relatable person with hopes, fears, crushing defeats, whatever you want to say. We're all people in this crazy, crazy world.
Yes, and
we're all the same. We're all the same.
The craziness continues. We'll leave it at that. Great to have you in again.
Thank you.
This is China Jedi, people.
If you're an English-speaking teacher from anywhere in the world and you have a bachelor's degree but need an official and accredited teaching license to get a job, get a visa to teach abroad, or most importantly to learn all those things you wish you knew before you stood in front of 30 plus students, then reach now to Teach Now and secure a professional US District of Columbia license in as little as 9 months. Online in no time, low cost, high quality, Teach Now. Get in the game. Immediately receive a $100 discount off your tuition by signing up to the Teach Now program via the link www.teach-now.edu/China Jedi.
May the smile be with you.